I believe we're just waiting for panel member Jocelyn Chandler to arrive. And there she is. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment of the City of Ottawa under the Planning Act. This video conference is also live streaming on YouTube. With me are my fellow panel members, Jocelyn Chandler, Stephen Lewis, Terrence Otto, and Martin Vervoort. My name is Fabien Poulin, and I will be chairing this hearing today. The procedure for this hearing will be as follows. Listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with an agenda item in different order. Committee members have reviewed the planning reports and any written submissions in support or in opposition to each of the applications. Today, we will hear oral submissions from any interested parties. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign posting. This declaration must be on file today before we can hear the application. Without it, we may have to adjourn the application or administer an oath if necessary. Can the coordinator confirm that we have received all statutory declarations?
Mr. Chair, we have not received any statutory declarations. You'll need to administer the oath for all agenda items.
Thank you very much. The committee may ask for a brief presentation of the application followed by questions from members and submissions from the public. Please address your comments to the chair, starting with your name and spelling it if necessary, and your municipal address for the record. The committee limits presentations to 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the discretion of the chair. Before we begin, we have 2 items of business to address. Does any member present need to declare an interest in any of the applications that are before us today or that are on the agenda of another committee panel? Ms. Chandler?
I have to declare for panel 1, item number 15, A-00336, that's 57 Hutchinson Avenue. I have a professional relationship with the applicants. Panel 2, items number 1 and 2, that's A-00357 and A-00359, 335 Sandhill, 2175 10th Line, and 352 Aquaview. The applicants are clients of mine.
Thank you. Anyone else have any declaration? Mr. Vervoort?
I'm declaring interest on panel 1, agenda item number 8, property at 473 Albert Street. The company I work for owns that property.
Thank you, Mr. Vervoort. I too have a declaration of interest on agenda item number 4 on this panel number 3. The location is 194-196 Hartsmere Drive. The agent on this file is a client of mine. We also have to adopt the minutes of the last public hearing, the meeting of January 13th. I'd like to ask panel members for approval of these minutes. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Just for the record, Mr. Chair, I'm abstaining because I was not at that meeting.
Thank you very much. We'll now hear the application schedules for this hearing, and we'll first deal with any items that may be adjourned. Is there anyone present who wishes to request an adjournment of one of the applications scheduled for this hearing? I believe we have 3 adjournment requests, beginning with item number 2, having to do with 80 Constant Slate. Is the applicant available? And that would be Emily Coyle. Ms. Coyle, are you available?
Hello. Hi.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you like to adjourn this application today?
Yes, so we've had conversations with the MVCA regarding their adjournment request. So we do have a meeting set up shortly with them. We'd like to, we're okay with the adjournment request, but we would like to be put on the next available agenda.
Fine. Madam Coordinator or Deputy Secretary, what's the next date for an application to be heard?
Mr. Chairman, the next date would be March 3rd.
March 3rd. Are you okay with March 3rd, Ms. Coyle?
Yes, I'm okay with March 3rd.
Perfect. I'd like to ask the panel if they're in favor of adjourning this application. Please raise your hand if you are. Your application is adjourned, Ms. Coyle, to March 3rd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item up for adjournment is item number 5, having to do with 865 Berry Side Road, I believe. And I'm looking for Ryan Polton. Mr. Polton, are you available? You're muted, Mr. Polton.
Good
Hello.
morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. You'd like to adjourn this application this morning?
Yes, we'd like to request an adjournment. It's in light of the MVCA comments regarding the location of the deck. We'd like to schedule a call with them to discuss their concerns before proceeding.
Thank you. And when would you like to adjourn that application till?
We think 2 weeks would definitely be enough.
Okay. Madam Deputy Secretary, do we have enough room on that date?
Yes, we do. I can confirm that, Mr. Chairman. We could put that on for the 3rd.
Okay. I'd like to ask panel members in favor of adjourning this application to March 3rd. Please raise your hand if you are in favor. Your application adjourned to March 3rd. Thank you very much, Mr. Polton.
Thank you.
And unless there's another one, I think this is the last adjournment request having to do with 2392 Roger Stevens Drive. Mr. Shipman, are you available? Mr. Shipman, you're muted.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Would you
Okay,
like to
you
have
can
your
hear me.
application adjourned? Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, yes. We've reviewed the Conservation Authority's request. We'd like to be heard today, Mr. Chair. We believe that their concerns can be addressed through the proposed condition contained in the planning report requiring lot grading and drainage plans for both the severed and retained parcels. These will fully set out proposed building envelopes and will demonstrate that the lots either are or are not suitable to accommodate building envelopes and septic systems. As you know, these lots have previously been approved by the committee and allowed to lapse because we had to enlarge them due to septic system analysis, nitrate dissolution rates, that type of thing. So we're quite confident that our grading plans will demonstrate the suitability of the lots. Right now, with staffing restrictions related to COVID and the winter conditions, it's very difficult to do the topographic survey work necessary to prepare the proposed grading and drainage plans. Again, as a condition of approval, those concerns would be addressed.
Okay. Do our conservation partners agree to go forward with hearing this application today?
If I may, through the chair, it's the decision of the committee to hear the application. I'm not the request being made from the Conservation Authority is typically from the OSSO, and the RVCA supports this position, is that these matters should be addressed prior to making a decision on the application and don't want it to go as a condition. Just in case that there are any issues, then you're back at square one trying to sort it out. I agree with Jeff Shipman's comments regarding the previous approval. However, the position for applications is that they get adjourned rather than be heard and placed under conditions for these types of matters. So that is our position.
Okay. So I think you're going to run a risk of maybe being declined today if it does not meet the requirements of the Conservation Authority. So you're prepared still to go forward?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we're prepared to run the risk of perhaps lots not being suitable for grading plans. I would just note that our previous approval included that condition as a condition of approval. I understand the Conservation Authority's concerns. We've had some lengthy discussion with planning in respect to their concerns. And indeed, we're prepared to agree to provide the grading and drainage design on all the lots involved, and including the retained portion in this instance. But as I say, it'd be very difficult to do the topographic survey work necessary at this time. We're prepared to move ahead if the committee is prepared to do so as well.
Okay, is the committee in favor of proceeding with this application today? All in favor, please raise your hand. We'll hear your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we'll now proceed with hearing the applications in the following order. We'll hear application number 1, application number 3, then application number 6. Number 4 will be at the end because I have a conflict. To that end, I'd like to call on application number 1. Mr. Price, are you available? This application is having to do with 4830 Stonecrest Road to subdivide the property to 3 parcels of land in order to create 2 new vacant lots for future residential development. Good morning, Mr. Price.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of committee. Rod Price of Rortar Land Development Consultants on behalf of the owners of 4830 Stonecrest. Before you with a couple of applications for some rural severances, one being 0.8 hectares, the other being 0.9.
Before you proceed, Mr. Price, I need to administer an oath
that's right.
concerning the sign posting on the property. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time? Do you swear?
I do swear, Mr. Chair.
Please proceed with a brief description of your application.
Yeah, a couple applications for severances for approximately 2-acre lots fronting onto Goleta Side Road, just east of Stonecrest Drive. The property is a corner rural lot, if you will, located at the northeast corner of Goleta Side Road and Stonecrest. We worked with staff through pre-consultation about 1.5 years ago, prepared an EIS as well as a hydrogeological terrain analysis, which was submitted as part of the applications. We're satisfied with the positive recommendation from staff. That being said, do question some of the conditions that are trying to be imposed as part of their support.
Okay, we'll get to those conditions near the end.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, anything more?
Nope, that's it in a nutshell.
Okay, perfect. I now like to ask staff, Mr. Walker, are you available?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Staff has reviewed the application and has no concerns with it, subject to the conditions provided.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if they have any questions or comments.
Sorry. Hello, Mr. Chair. The Conservation Authority has reviewed the application. We do note there is a wetland identified on the retained property, but both the severed lots and the retained land maintain a building envelope outside of that feature. So the Conservation Authority has no concerns with the application.
Thank you very much. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions, comments, or concerns. Mr. Otto? Didn't hear you, Mr. Otto.
I do not, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vervoort, any questions, comments, or concerns?
None, thank you.
Mr. Lewis, any questions, comments, or concerns?
None at this time.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
None.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Price, you'd like to go through those conditions?
Yeah, and I appreciate the committee's indulgence on some of these. I'm sure you've heard some of these comments in the past. Starting with condition 2, the condition reads that the owner prepares and submits a revised EIS to the satisfaction of planning. Basically, they're trying, the EIS was prepared by a very reputable natural environment engineer at Gemtech, who did a complete analysis of the severed portions that are before you today. In that EIS, a development envelope was provided. It is not a half acre in size, as staff would suggest in the condition. We feel that a lot of effort and resources went into the preparation of the EIS, and that the development envelope that is identified in the EIS is both appropriate and warranted based on the studies completed by Gemtech. And by decreasing that down to a half an acre is going to limit the opportunity, not necessarily of developing but where development or where a future dwelling can be located on the property. So we believe that the outcome and the recommendations in EIS are appropriate and should be accepted as such, and the condition, we're asking that the condition potentially be revised to reflect what has been identified in the EIS in terms of a future development envelope. Clients are happy to have, there's no opposition of a development agreement that speaks to this and refers back to both the Hydro G study, which we'll get to later, as well as the EIS. There's really no reason to scale and limit that flexibility. The work has been completed as requested as part of the application and has been reviewed. So we're just hoping for a little bit of more flexibility in terms of where the dwellings can be located on the property as identified in the EIS that's been submitted in support of the applications.
Ms. Chandler, comment?
Could planning respond to that with respect to what the concerns are related to on the EIS? Is it a location of building envelope concern, or is it just a completeness of the EIS? Do you know what it is?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So there are several concerns that staff has with the EIS. The first issue that staff has with the EIS is the version that was provided to us wasn't quite clear, and it was difficult to identify the development envelope on the EIS. There were no dimensions provided for the proposed lots on the EIS, nor were there dimensions for the proposed development envelopes on the EIS. And so staff is looking for a revised EIS that clearly lay out the dimensions of the proposed lots and the dimensions of the proposed development envelope. Additionally, staff is recommending a development envelope that does not exceed 0.5 acres in order to minimize and contain the impact of development on the surrounding natural features and their associated functions.
Thank you. Ms. Chandler?
So the whole purpose of an EIS is to identify whether there's a development envelope on the site that can be supported by staff. I am not in favor of removing this condition. If that was a concern of the applicants, then this should have been adjourned until it was sorted out with the city. I don't think that, I'm not comfortable with leaving it open at this point.
Thank you. Any other comments, Mr. Otto? I believe you said no.
That's right.
Okay. Mr. Revort, any questions, comments, or concerns?
Well, I think the EIS has to properly identify the building envelopes. I'm not sure that the arbitrary figure has to be used necessarily to identify a building envelope. If the report is complete, and the building envelope can be larger than 0.5 hectares. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
Yeah, a question. And Mr. Walker mentioned that the dimensions of the lot weren't on the EIS. That should be easy to find, though. We must know the dimensions of the lot. And the other question I have, was a building envelope identified on the EIS that's there, and are we just missing the dimensions of it, or is the building envelope not work?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So there was So we are able to identify the dimensions of the lot based on the material on the application. However, it was not shown on the EIS, and a complete EIS would quickly include the dimensions of the lot and also the dimensions of the building envelope, which was not included in this EIS.
But there was a building envelope on the EIS, just don't have the measurements on it.
Yes, that's correct. There was a building envelope shown on the EIS. However, in order for an EIS to be complete, we need to have a full understanding of the total size of the building envelope, and it should be dimensioned.
So another EIS isn't necessary. It's just a matter of writing those dimensions on it.
So yes, he isn't required. The applicant isn't required to provide a new EIS, but the applicant is required to simply revise the EIS that has been provided.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to that, yes, there are development envelopes that were clearly identified in the EIS that was prepared that showed setbacks from the wetland that the CA had referred to. Yes, there are not dimensions on it. That being said, it's pretty easy to tell that the development envelope that was identified by Gemtech when they completed their study would be more than half an acre, right? So it provides a lot more flexibility in terms of where dwelling, septic, well, garages can be located. Due to the fact that that work in the EIS has been completed, and it's nothing for Gemtech to throw some dimensions on it. My concern is that that dimension, once we put it, is going to exceed, in the EIS that was prepared with no negative impacts in that envelope, and that's where development, Gemtech is recommending that development can occur. It just takes, if we just arbitrarily say, no, it has to be a half an acre with no particular reasons or comments based on the EIS provided, the dimensions are just numbers on the plan. It's just taking away that ability to have a little bit more flexibility for future dwellings to be located within that development envelope that's been identified. So unless there's some concrete scientific evidence provided by the city based on the EIS provided, as opposed to just a broad stroke comment that, we want to limit it for impacts, that work has been completed by qualified professionals identifying where the development can occur on these proposed new lots. So by including in the condition that it be, shrunk down to a half an acre, it just takes that flexibility. It's not a hill to die on, but it does take away the flexibility identified in the EIS. And as part of the pre-application process, go complete the EIS, identify where the development, that's all that work has occurred. And if it's a matter of revising it to include those dimensions, that's fine. That all gets contained within a development agreement, which is proposed. We have no issue with that. It's just trying to maintain that flexibility that's been identified through the EIS where the dwellings can be located.
Mr. Walker, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the provincial policies and municipal policies state that development should seek to minimize the impact on natural features and their functions. And staff is willing and open to working with the applicant to identify an appropriate development envelope. And so if the applicant would like, we can adjourn the application today and have a discussion with their environmental consultant to come up with a development envelope that would be to our satisfaction and that would be acceptable to the applicant, or the condition can remain as is, and staff can meet with the applicant's environmental consultant to come up with a development envelope that would be appropriate for both parties.
So if I may add, Mr. Chair, to that, I think we have no interest in adjourning. Like I said, it's not a hill to die on. Perhaps there's an opportunity to revise the condition in that the owner prepares a revised EIS as suggested to however you want to word it, come up with an appropriate development envelope. So that we're not going away with a condition that says thou shalt be, half an acre. If we're going to include these, we're going to provide a revision as part of an EIS that is going to be submitted to clear a condition. If we can word it such that it shall be half an acre, that's great. And we'll happily work with staff through the clearing of the conditions if we're not lucky enough to proceed with approval.
Okay.
That's a good compromise. I hopefully staff agrees with that. It leaves that flexibility for those discussions to occur while we're clearing the condition and the revised EIS, and allows us to move on.
Mr. Walker, any objections to that compromise?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the condition doesn't speak to a half-acre development envelope. The half-acre was noted in the body of the report, and it is recommended that the development envelope be reduced to a half an acre. The condition is worded in that the EIS should be to the satisfaction of staff. And as I mentioned, staff is open to meeting with the applicant and their environmental consultant to come up with an appropriate development envelope.
Thank you. Any further comments from the panel? Mr. Otto? Mr. Vivort?
No, I didn't know if Mr. Price had comments on any of the other conditions.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yep.
Please proceed then, Mr. Price.
Okay, on to condition number 3, the ever-present, when it comes to rural severances, request for excessive road widenings. In this particular instance, we can definitely agree with staff in terms of providing road widening along Goleta. Typically, as the committee will recall, up until about a year and a half ago, road widenings were only taken off of the severed portions, not necessarily retained. And that we have no issue with potential road widening requirements being taken off of the Goleta side road frontage. However, the owners do have some significant concerns about taking an additional road widening off of Stonecrest. As I mentioned, this is a corner rural lot, if you will. The lots that are being created are nowhere near, as far away as possible as that Stonecrest frontage. From what I could tell, looking at the city's mapping, there are no, in the lot creation that's happened, occurred previously to the north. There's been, when you look at the mapping, there's no little jut outs for road widenings that occurred during that. The clients are very concerned that this is excessive in nature and taking advantage of the policy and perhaps legal department's opinion. So we're just putting it out there that, if possible, the Goleta side road widening makes sense. The clients definitely do not agree with the Stonecrest road widening at this time.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Lewis.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I would support that, removing that from the condition. I hope I could convince the rest of the panel to do that too. Are you and your colleagues ready to take the chances, Mr. Price?
Pardon me, sorry, Mr. Chair.
I said, I fully support what you just said about the road widening, and I would be happy to support your point. And I say, I hope I could convince the rest of my colleagues to do it too. Are you and your clients ready to accept the possible consequences?
The possible consequences being that legal department might appeal this,
right?
And use this as a guinea pig?
Yes.
No. My clients are,
Let's move on.
No, it's a comment. And I'm going to put my best foot forward every time I'm before you and I see this. I fundamentally, as a planner, think this is wrong to request this, particularly from rural landowners who, not to get into the history of it all, but we're, 10 years ago, taking away opportunities for rural lot subdivisions to occur in the rural area. This is the only way they can take advantage of their investment. And as many of you know, many of these people are putting a lot at risk to come before you nice folks for these severance applications. And it gets more and more difficult and more onerous every time. These are not wealthy landowners. These are rural landowners who have been at the property for a while. And fundamentally, I think it is wrong that the city take advantage of certain wording in the Planning Act to take advantage of rural landowners in this particular instance. And happy to have that on the record, and I will state that every time. But in terms of being vulnerable to an appeal, absolutely, they can't afford that.
Well, that's the problem. We need that to happen. Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Ms. Chandler, any comments? Okay. Mr. Price, any further comments about the conditions?
Yeah, and I'll finalize with condition 6 in terms of the requirement for professional engineer, geoscientist prepare the report. Report has been submitted as part of this application, make it deemed complete by Fieldstone Engineering. We don't believe that the conditions with respect to that, any additional above and beyond, what has been submitted should be included in the development agreement. There's recommendations of, potentially a 1 foot reserve or 30 centimeter reserve or drilling a well on the property. I think that's just, again, a blanket condition statement that is provided by staff, which has continuously been occurring for severance applications, particularly in West Carleton. Again, it was the clients went above and beyond in terms of what was submitted in support of the application by having a professional geoscientist go out and provide a hydro-G and terrain analysis report. In that report, the feeling of Fieldstone, and speaking with them earlier this morning, is that the condition shouldn't be even included other than the report should be included as a development agreement. Anything to deal with drilling wells or 1 foot reserves are not required. The study that was submitted demonstrates that the properties can be developed both from well and septic perspective to meet all provincial standards and regulations. In particular, nitrate impact assessment, which shows that it's about 24% below what the provincial standards are. Fieldstone has reviewed the nitrate assessment and confirms that it meets these provincial standards and everything can be achieved. So again, to require these rural landowners to go out and drill a well or put a 1 foot reserve, which is, I can't remember what the application fee for the removal of a 1 foot reserve is up to now. I think it's about $4,000. It's just onerous and almost piling on. Particularly when the hydro-G assessment has been submitted. There's obviously no negative comments were provided at this time. So we're hopeful the condition can be amended as such to take some of the, whether it's, the 1 foot reserve and the requirement for the well, because the hydro-G study that's been submitted covers all that off.
Thank you. Mr. Walker, comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant has submitted a hydrogeological report. Unfortunately, those reports aren't reviewed until the property has been conditionally approved, and they are reviewed as a condition of severance by the city's hydrogeologist. The basin geowater with the site is shown as being having thin soils, and there is evidence of cost. And I reviewed the recommendation and conclusions of the report. And the author of the report noted that there is thin soils on the site and that the site is hydrogeologically sensitive. And because of that, it is likely that the well will be required to be built to certain specifications, which will require either the installation of the well before we can clear the condition or the placement of a 30 centimeter reserve. Again, this will be determined at the time our hydrogeologist reviews the report and provides her recommendation.
Thank you. So now we're going to look at these different conditions, and I'd like to have comments. As the panel in agreement with leaving the condition number 2 as is in accordance with the planning department? Mr. Otto, do you agree with leaving that condition as is?
Yes,
or would you like to have it revised to reflect Mr. Price's comments?
Well, if we could get it revised to reflect Mr. Price's comments, that would be fine with me.
Okay, Mr. Vervoort?
I would leave the condition as is because it doesn't reference that the building envelope has to be 0.5 acres. And I think we've had a discussion already that that'll be discussed between planning and the applicant. So I would leave it as is because it doesn't make specific reference to that.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Vervoort.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Chandler?
I'm not willing to start picking and choosing and trying to refine hydro-G conditions between different severance applications.
Ms. Chandler, we're just
I'm
talking-
not, sorry,
we're just talking
yeah,
about condition number 2.
I am not interested in changing the condition.
Thank you. Condition number 6, I guess Ms. Chandler, your comment is the same for that one. You don't want to change that condition?
That's correct.
Okay. Mr. Otto?
Leave it there, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Revort?
I would leave the condition as is.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Yeah, I guess leave it because like Mr. Walker mentioned, they don't even tackle that till after we give consent for the application. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, very good. So, and condition number 3, you're not prepared to have that go to LPAT, so we'll leave it at that. So to that end, I'd like to ask the panel if they would approve this application with the 6 conditions as presented by planning. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Your application is approved, Mr. Price, with those 6
Thank you,
conditions.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and sorry for being a pain in the backside. It's some of these things are important though to rural landowners, so I appreciate your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Price.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. Now we're moving on to application number 3, having to do with 3 Dorati Lane. Mr. Polton, are you available? This application is to permit a reduced lot width for the construction of a detached dwelling on the vacant parcel of land.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. My name's Ryan Polton. I'm a planner at Novatech. Also on the call with me today is Murray Chown, Director of Planning at Novatech.
Thank you, Mr. Polton. I need to administer an oath concerning the signposting on the property. Are you prepared to take that oath today?
Yes.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Please proceed with a brief description of your application today.
Okay, the owners of the property filed a building permit application to construct a single detached dwelling on an existing vacant lot. This is at 3 Doherty Lane. Through that building permit application, a zoning comment came back that they needed a variance for lot width. So that's why we're in front of you here today. This was the only zoning comment on the minor variance application. On the building permit application. So the property, 3 Doherty Lane. It's a regular shaped lot. That's in Stittsville. You can see Stittsville Main Street to the east. This property is at the very end of Doherty Lane. It's a small residential lane just off of Manchester Street. Both Doherty Lane and Manchester Street are developed with residential properties. All of the properties adjacent to 3 Doherty Lane are developed with single detached dwellings. As well, there's a larger parcel to the west that's a tree cover lot with no frontage. So the minor variance is required to bring the existing lot into conformity with the zoning bylaw. It's specific to how lot width is measured. It's from the midpoint of the front lot line to the midpoint of the rear lot line. That's your lot depth. And then you draw a line across that perpendicular, and that gives you your lot width measured from the required front yard setback. In this case, the property is zoned residential first density subzone D, which requires a lot width of 20 meters. The existing lot, as shown on our sketch here, its lot width is calculated at 15.72 meters. So this variance has to do with the existing lot, not the proposed dwelling, and it's simply to bring the existing lot into compliance with the zoning provisions. So I'll move on to a quick discussion on the 4 tests for minor variance. So the first test is the general intent and purpose of the official plan is maintained. So this property, as well as the surrounding residential community, is designated general urban area. This permits a full range and type of residential uses, as well as official plan policies that support infill development. This minor variance application will facilitate the development of a new detached dwelling on this existing vacant lot. The new dwelling will add to the residential character of both Doherty Lane as well as Manchester Street. It's infill development, and it's consistent with providing a range and type of uses in this area. So it meets, it maintains the intent and purpose of the official plan, specifically general urban area designation. The second test is the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained. So the purpose of the R1 zone is to restrict development to detached dwellings in areas designated general urban area and regulate development so that it's compatible with surrounding uses. Again, this is a technical variance for the existing lot width, and it will allow for a detached dwelling on the property. A detached dwelling is a permitted use in the R1D zone. The existing lot is 2,120 square meters, which greatly exceeds the minimum lot area requirement of 600 square meters. The existing lot is of sufficient size and shape to accommodate the detached dwelling, and it would be the proposed dwelling would be compatible with surrounding residential use. So it granting this minor variance would maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. The third test is if the minor variance is considered desirable for the use of the land. In keeping with the general urban area designation of the surrounding residential uses, this variance would allow residential development on a vacant lot in a neighborhood. It meets the definition of infill development in the official plan. So it'd be infill development on an existing lot. And the proposed development, being a single detached dwelling, has regard for the existing built form of the area as well as the existing lot fabric of the community. So we consider that granting the minor variance desirable for the use of the land. And then the last test is it minor? And that the minor variance would bring the existing lot into conformity with the zoning bylaw. And it is the only zoning comment received on the building permit application. There's no other comments regarding the proposed dwelling, nothing regarding required yards, nothing regarding proposed building height. No other minor variances are required to obtain a building permit. So we are of the opinion that this variance is minor. It's recognizing an existing condition, the existing lot today. It has nothing to do with the proposed development, and that the minor variance does represent good land use planning.
Thank you, Mr. Fulton. I'd like to ask Mr. Walker from the city staff if he has any comments, questions, or concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff has reviewed the proposal and has no concerns with it. I would note that the tree protection bylaw is in effect and that a tree information report will be required to, at the time of the building permit application, and that it is strongly recommended that the applicant consult with the city's forestry branch on how to plan around protected trees on the site.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if they have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We've reviewed the application and have no concerns.
Thank you, Ms. Ogden. Deputy Secretary Treasurer, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just did we get a statutory declaration on this? I might have been multitasking here.
Yes, we did.
We did. Okay, just making sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel if they have any questions or comments. Mr. Vervoort, any questions or comments?
Just a question. This must be a lot of record. Do we have any information on how it was created? It seems to be a bit of an odd lot in the middle of the subdivision.
I don't have any information on when the lot was created. Sorry.
Okay, and just the plan of survey shows various encroachments with a propane tank, patio stones, etc. Will those be removed as part of the development of the vacant lot?
So those encroachments are existing conditions over the existing lot line. The variance that we're seeking is simply for lot width, recognizing the dimensions of the lot. I don't know what the plans are in terms of landscaping for that side yard, whether that existing condition would remain or not. But that would be handled through the approval of the building permit in terms of landscaping.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Before I proceed to the rest of the panel, Mr. Yalden Thompson had his hand up for a second. He's a member of the public.
Yeah, my name is David Yalden Thompson. I am the owner and residence for 17 Manchester, which is the building on the corner of Manchester and Doherty Lane. So directly behind me would be the 3 Doherty Lane. I want to give my approval to this change. So this section of Doherty Lane plus Manchester is 110 years old. The severances in these sizes are 65 years. So that's been an empty lot for 68 years. So this is the first build going on that since the pre-farm of 1862. Of note, the tanks and the impacts have already been moved because I can see them right out my back door. And the sign for adjustment is also there because I can also see that out my back door. So the owners wanted to put a house there to fill that spot, which has been an empty. I've been living there for 12 years, and to put a house of a family into that slot makes perfect sense as a neighborhood, as one of the oldest neighborhoods in the Stittsville area. So I just wanted, as a homeowner directly adjacent and looking into that lot, to propose to bring forward to the chairman that we as homeowners in this neighborhood absolutely approve bringing a new home and a new family into our area.
Thank you, Mr. Yalden Thompson. Mr.
Absolutely.
Lewis, any
Thank you,
questions? Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
No, full support for the application. Goulburn was always run as a good municipality.
Mr. Otto, any questions or comments?
I have only one comment, and that's in regards to emergency vehicles and snow plows. If that lane is only 6.1 meters wide, if this was out in the country looking for a severance, we'd have to put a roundabout circle at the bottom. Does that not apply in this case, or is there sufficient room for the emergency vehicles to get down there and then get turned around?
Mr. Walker, have you? Sorry, Mr. Walker, have you looked into that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's something that's dealt with at the building permit stage. So unfortunately, I have no information on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may just add to that, there's no ability through either the Committee of Adjustment minor variance process or through the building permit process for the city to require or even consider the possibility of a turning circle at the end of Doherty Lane. If there were consent applications involved here or a subdivision application, that would open up the opportunity for the city to investigate that, but they have absolutely no ability to go down that road under these circumstances.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Otto? Any further questions, Mr. Otto?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Chandler, any questions or comments?
I just have a question. There's no road frontage requirements for this lot. I would have thought that was a greater concern than the lot width. And it's not directly relevant to the minor variance. I'm just curious.
The minimum load frontage requirement in the bylaw is 3 meters, and we meet that requirement.
All right, thanks.
Okay, thank you. You had your hand up, Mr. Yalden Thompson.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because of the experience, they do already get garbage and plow services down Doherty Lane, which is a backup usually using a front loader. And we've had fire services down. It's 194 feet long. So they get down there and then back up. And then there's a hydrant down at that end anyways. There was a fire about 8 years ago on 1 Doherty Lane, which had that experiences.
Great, good information, thank you. There being no further comments or questions, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hand. Your application is approved. Mr. Poulton, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Now we'll move on to application number 6. Application number 6 is having to do with 2392 Stevens Drive. Mr. Shipman, are you available? This application is to provide the property into, subdivide the property into 4 separate parcels of land in order to create 3 new vacant residential lots. Mr. Shipman? Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Chairman.
I need to administer the oath concerning the sign posting. Are you available to take that oath now?
Yes, I am.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed with a brief description of your application this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're no doubt aware, this is an application to create 3 new lots along Roger Stevens Drive in the village of North Gore. These 3 lots were previously approved by the committee. However, they've been allowed to lapse. Our terrain analysis studies done by our engineer indicated that in order to meet the newer guidelines, we need larger lots in relation to the septic systems and nitrate dissolution, this type of thing. So we've done that study. Our engineer's recommendation is the size of the lots as we now have them. So we're asking that they be reapproved. I have reviewed the conditions proposed by planning, and we have no concerns with those. As noted earlier, we will be providing engineering design, lot grading and drainage plans for the severed lots, as well as the retained lot as a condition of approval to demonstrate that the lots will support development.
Thank you, Mr. Shipman. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Walker, representing the city, to give us his comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff has reviewed the applications and has no concerns with them. I would note that previously staff had objected to the approval of the applications, given that the secondary plan for the area recommends that residential development take place via plan of subdivision. However, after meeting with Mr. Shipman and having discussions with our policy team, and our conservation partners, we are satisfied now that it is appropriate for the lots to be created via severance as opposed to a plan of subdivision in this instance. And as such, staff will no longer be objecting to their approval.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. I'd like to ask our conservation partners if they have any questions or comments.
Yeah, if I may, through the chair. As I mentioned previously, the Ottawa Septic System Office has requested the adjournment. The RVCA supports that request as well. Typically, where there is an application for severance, the request is that a site plan indicating where the septic system is going to be placed on the property for the development is provided prior to the application. It's not something that there is generally support from the RVCA to be conditioned. Obviously, that's up to the committee on which way they want to go with it, but that's the position that Conservation Authority and the Ottawa Septic System Office have taken. Particularly in this case, while the applications were previously approved, we are currently working on Stevens Creek floodplain mapping, and there are some concerns with how that's going to affect this area. And just in an abundance of caution, even prior to us bringing floodplain mapping forward, wanting to make sure that there aren't any issues going forward down the road for the applicant. We're not concerned that there isn't enough room on the lot for the dwelling of the system, just making sure that it's located in the right spot. So a little bit of a difference from the previous application to now. And I wish I could give you more information, but we haven't finalized our floodplain mapping. So it's kind of something that's up in the air at this point from our end. So our concerns are based on an abundance of caution for the site.
Thank you. I'd like to ask the panel if they've got any questions or comments. Ms. Chandler?
I guess I would like to at least ask the applicant why, given that we adjourned this discussion with respect to the sewage system has not been sorted out with the OSSO in the interim? I mean, there's been time to have this discussion and work out. I don't like seeing this come forwards, discomfort on the part of the septic system office when I think these things are fairly easily resolved before bringing them before the committee.
Mr. Shipman?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, we've had, since our last hearing, December 7th, as indicated at the outset, what with COVID restrictions and winter conditions, we haven't had, and craziness in general, we haven't had the opportunity to do the topographic survey work necessary to prepare the grading and drainage plans. As indicated by the RVCA, there's not generally concern that the lots won't support a development envelope on each of them, or at least that's been my feedback, both from Conservation Authority and from planning. So I don't see why we can't provide this as a condition of approval. The applicant has already lost his 3 lots. He's because of the new septic system analysis conditions in relation to again, the nitrate dissolution. We would really like to move forward and get these done. They are, high and dry. We've looked at them, we've walked them. We're satisfied that they'll support a septic system. Worst case scenario, they don't, and they lapse again. I understand when there is concern, the Conservation Authority likes to have the grading and drainage plans up front. However, I would also point out at this stage that under the current regulatory floodplain, the lots aren't impacted. We're aware that they will be, but we're also aware that there'll be a building envelope, a sufficient area for a building envelope outside of the floodplain.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can just follow up with the Conservation Authority, I agree. Applications go in under the policies and the information that's in place. So the floodplain, fair enough. Perhaps on behalf of the OSSO, specifically, what is the concern? We all know that winter conditions are very difficult to do lot grading and drainage plans in. So specifically, what is the concern? That there won't be a development envelope available on these lots for the sewage system and the development?
The concern is having that engineered site plan submitted as part of the application, and that it's provided prior to a decision being made. This has been a request from the OSSO on a number of applications. Sometimes the committee has provided as conditions, sometimes they haven't. From a consistency perspective, this is the request that the OSSO generally makes where there hasn't been provided sufficient information for the septic system location on a new lot. And that is the concern is that it's provided prior to the decision, and the going forward on a condition basis has been problematic in the past. I'm not saying anything specific to this application has raised concern, as Mr. Shipman has indicated that we're comfortable that there is room on the property for development envelope. However, from a grading perspective, wanting to make sure where that's going to be is satisfactory for the OSSO.
Anything further, Ms. Chandler?
Well, I mean, the condition is to the applicant's risk, and I certainly understand in some circumstances that in advance of approval, especially on tiny constrained lots, that this should be looked at. On this, I'm inclined to leave it as a condition for the applicant to deal with.
Thank you. Mr. Lewis, any questions or comments?
I think I agree with Ms. Chandler. We're around and round we go here. I think a condition can do this, and it can be dealt with at the building permit stage. And let's get this rolling. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Otto, you're muted, sir. Okay,
I'm fine with it as a condition as it is.
Thank you, Mr. Vervoort.
I'm fine with it under the circumstances. The applicant's sophisticated, understands the risks. They've been through this once before already. They've enlarged the lot, so I'm confident that there will be a buildable envelope on each of the properties. So I'm prepared to go ahead with the condition.
Thank you very much. There being no further questions or comments, I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
maybe we should ask Mr. Shipman if he has any comments on the conditions.
Mr. Shipman, do you have any comments on the conditions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, we're generally satisfied with the conditions. I would just note that the condition for a widening along Roger Stevens to 11.5, we're already well in excess of that. We're at like 15. That property was previously widened and conveyed to the city. I'll leave it to planning's discretion if they want to leave that in. It just adds a little bit more work for me to demonstrate to the city surveyor that the far end of the property of the retained parcel has been widened, but I can assure the committee it's been widened throughout.
Mr. Lewis.
I think I'd like to try and convince the committee to take that condition right out of there if you're in agreement with that, Mr. Shipman.
Mr. Shipman, are you willing to risk the wrath of the city's legal department?
Oh, no, certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I don't want to get caught up in doing an appeal on the basis that the road has already been widened. You know, I'm just suggesting that condition could be removed, but I don't want to land in an appeal. So if it's the committee's discretion, let's just leave it as is.
Okay. So that being said, you're in agreement with all the 7 conditions then? Thank you. So that
Chair, if I might add too, even if we don't include it as a condition and it goes to appeal, then he's still going to have to demonstrate that the road's already been widened. So it doesn't really advance the situation. So we might as well leave it in.
Thank you.
You're missing the point, Mr. Verboot.
I'd like to ask the panel for approval of this application. All in favor, please raise your hands. Your application is approved, Mr. Shipman. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will now be leaving the meeting today and leaving you in the capable hands, or more than capable hands, of Mr. Vervoort. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day. Bye for now.
Mr. Chair. So good morning, everyone. So now we'll deal with our last application today, which is agenda item number 4, which is an application by Doyle Homes to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land in order to establish separate ownerships for each half of the existing 2-story semi-detached dwelling currently under construction. I believe the agent on file is Mr. Fernandez.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Yes, and members, thank you very much. Danny Fernandez, Fernandez Law Office, on for the owners, Doyle Homes Limited, for the separation of the currently under build semi-detached homes on Hartsmere.
Okay, now before we start, Mr. Fernandez, we have to administer an oath regarding the sign posting. Are you able to swear or affirm the oath?
I am, yes.
Okay, so I'll administer it. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing as instructed and was clearly visible and legible during that time?
Yeah, I do swear.
Thank you. And just before we begin, I think there was an amendment to the application for file number B0013. I believe the frontage should be amended to read 13.16 meters instead of 8.63 meters. Is that correct?
That's correct, as well as the area. Correct.
And the area should be amended to read 396.9 square meters instead of 223.28 square meters. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll move those for the record. So you can proceed and just give us a very brief description, Mr. Fernandez, of the application.
So it's just a lot in the plan of subdivision which allowed a semi-detached unit to be two semi-detached units to be built on the lot, and we are just looking for legal severance. And outside of the conditions, the only one I really have issue with is number 1. I don't think it's appropriate in terms of the cash in lieu of parkland, only because the zoning always contemplated a semi-detached unit or 2 semi-detached units, and we are just essentially creating legal tenure to be able to convey each parcel separately.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walker, comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff has reviewed the application and has no concerns with it as amended.
And what about the comment regarding cash in lieu of parkland?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, cash in lieu of parkland is a condition that's required by both the Planning Act and the city's parkland dedication bylaw. And it doesn't matter the zoning of the property, so long as there is a net gain in unit, cash in lieu of parkland will be applicable. Because you're going from one lot where you would essentially have one dwelling unit to 2 lots to have more than one dwelling unit, cash in lieu of parkland is applicable. There's a net gain in units, so it applies.
Any response to that, Mr. Fernandez?
Well, given the fact that the zoning and that lot contemplated 2 units and building permits were issued and paid for, are you saying that it was not covered in what was approved through the zoning process and the approval of the plan of subdivision? That just a creation, the lot, yes, the number of units, but it was contemplated that 2 units would be located on that lot, and it was contemplated. So I'm not sure how there would be an increase of parkland issued. That issue could have been raised at the time of plan of subdivision. If this was one single family home and I was creating two semis, even though allowed, but it's authorized by zoning right now.
Mr. Chair, I guess in response to your first question about building permit, so cash in lieu of parkland isn't collected at the building permit stage. As it relates to the plan of subdivision stage, when the lot was created, it was created as a single lot, if I'm not mistaken. And so cash in lieu of parkland would have been on the basis of 1 lot as opposed to 2 lots. But if you can demonstrate that cash in lieu of parkland was paid at the plan of subdivision stage, then the condition can be cleared. If not, cash in lieu of parkland would apply.
We have a similar one, like if you look at the reference fund that's been submitted to the committee, you have the lot immediately adjacent to the east of the property being 192, 190, also semi-detached on lot 19, all contemplated authorizing 2 dwelling units to be built. I have not had occasion where this was from a minor variance requiring an additional lot being contemplated, but it was always contemplated that these lots could become 2 semi-detached units. So there's clearly no way of showing at the plan of subdivision that cash in lieu of parkland was paid, but the city planning department would have authorized the establishment of these type of units through the zoning to authorize those 2 units to be built on lot 18. So therefore, the city was giving authority to allow 2 units to be built. So there's no increase. There was no, from a density point of view, there was no additional burden being created in terms of whether the city required more parkland lands because the fact that there was going to be 2 units on lot 18. Like it was part of the process, or else the city would have just authorized a single family home on lot 18, and then I would understand that cash in lieu of parkland would be required in the case of 2 semis being separated. We're authorizing essentially the ability to transfer 2 semis, which by planning were authorized under the plan of subdivision.
Yeah, I think we're going down a rabbit hole here. I mean, I think the committee's general position is that cash in lieu of parkland is payable if required, but it's certainly open to you to have that further discussion and make those arguments to the city. I'll just ask if there there's any comments from our conservation partners, Mr. Lavant.
Chair, there are no concerns or objections from us.
Thank you. Comments from members of the committee, Mr. Lewis,
No comments.
Ms. Chandler,
None.
Mr. Otto.
No comments, thank you.
Okay. I have no concerns or comments. Just one more question for Mr. Fernandez. With respect to the party wall, building code services are asking that that you provide confirmation that it's been properly constructed for fire separation and noise. I'm assuming that that's been done.
Yes.
So that would be proposed to be added as a fifth condition, just to provide that confirmation, which shouldn't be difficult to do.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay. So I would ask the members of the committee to approve the application. I would leave the cash in lieu of parkland in, but add the wording if required under the circumstances. So that it's certainly open to Mr. Fernandez to have that further discussion or argument with the planning department to determine whether or not the parkland levy bylaw apply in this particular case. So all those in favor? So the application is approved, Mr. Fernandez. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Thank you.
So I don't believe that there's any further business before the committee, so we'll adjourn until our next meeting of March 3rd. Thank you very much, everyone.